Okay, so I'll get started. So my name is Andrew, and we are with Swift Immersive. You can see David here on the line, and he's a part of our crew, and he's a part of the marketing side of it. And then we have others that are in the background working alongside of us. And we bring innovation into the marketplace. And one of those solutions we're bringing into the marketplace is called Blaick.ai. So Blaick.ai. And we came up with that name because we loved how AI and Blaick kind of mashed together. And we used it to bring this name to life. And we're doing that with Nicholas here, who's on the call. So Nicholas is going to share some of his journey about who he is, K-Tech, and then Blaick. And then he's going to get into a demo about what Blaick is. And then from there, we will open up for questions. So thanks for joining us today. And Nick, you have the stage.
Yeah. So, Nicholas Cameradiner, I've been working in various finance and defense industries for a while now. That is with other companies, with my own company. So really a lot of this came from working with various AI tools and the problem of running into simple things that I'm doing, but having to use these massive models that just don't actually make sense for what I'm doing. Trying to drive from, using an Opus model for everything down to like a little bit more like a focused model overall. The other piece of that became, since I do a lot of security work as well, and having worked in the defense industry, there's always a lot of, we don't want this going out and everything. So the idea with Blaick became having a middleware piece in the middle that could help to not only route your request to a more appropriate model for something that's a simple request, but to also help to make sure that you're not sharing sensitive data and to help obscure that if needed. So some of the biggest kind of security issues with a lot of AI models lately have been people just pasting API keys into chats, pasting a lot of personal information into chats. So trying to help provide a way to prevent that from making it to the models. Ultimately, by using a lot of the open source models even, we are really able to remove it even being processed on someone's server and being used for training data, but you're able to kind of keep a little bit more of that private model usage. So you're able to sit there and work with it in a private setting and ask it what you need to ask it, work with it, but know that your data is not being used to directly train models. So, and just kind of opening up a lot more models, while Opus and the GPTs are fantastic models and Anthropic continues to launch new ones over and over again, you just don't need that heavy of a model for every day-to-day task necessarily. And especially if you have privacy concerns, using those models, their terms and conditions do allow them to train off of your data, which is never an ideal situation. So to kind of jump in a little bit and show off Blaick a little bit more. So once you log in at app.blaick.ai, this is kind of what you will get dropped into. You get your chats to the side. You'll start out with 50,000 tokens for a trial. And then really you can sit here and choose different models, and we're onboarding new models all the time. So these like GPT OSS ones, those are actually chat GPT models, but they're open sourced. So they are not running on OpenAI's servers. They're running on servers that we have control of, which again, just helps to create that level of security. We do also have this fun auto router, so you can turn this on and kind of adjust based off of how you want it to prioritize your request. Do you want a fast response? Do you want a cost-effective response? Just kind of what are you looking for as far as an auto router? So both of those are available. So all of that is available ultimately. And ultimately, even kind of within the chat, you're able to move between different models. So you can sit here and start with like a big Kimmy model for kind of some overarching stuff. And then if you're like, okay, I'm ready for you to go through stuff, you can sit here and send it to a super cheap llama model, which just allows you to, again, super optimize your costs overall. And again, kind of in the middle there, it's watching all of there's a piece analyzing your request, making sure that, you don't accidentally send over an API key to something. And if you do, it helps to obfuscate that and prevent it from even making it to the model to be used. Now, ultimately, every time we do these models, a fresh one is spun up. So there's no chance of data being leaked between model runs. So you're not worried about your data being used in someone else's model based off of context. So the context is preserved to yours. We spin it up, use the context, generate everything, and spit it back out. Yeah, I kind of want to pause there for any specific questions while I take a sip of my drink.
So if you have any questions, you're welcome to go ahead and ask. If not, I'll ask you one, Nicholas. How does this differ from the chat models we're seeing, the chat bots that are out there that are saying that they can give you privacy and security?
Yeah, so I think the biggest difference is right now we're only using like open source models that we can run. So we run these in a secure environment that prevents any data going out from where the models run. So the data comes in, it gets ran through the model and comes back. So you have essentially a secure sandbox environment where your request is being handled. So it provides that better guarantee that your data is staying within our context, within your context, and not going out and being used for training data. So that's kind of that's a operational model of how we do it. Whereas, a lot of times when you're using like ChatGPT or Anthropic, great models, but you're running on their servers, they collect all the data and use it to train their models. Whereas we have no plans to do that now or in the future. We want to help make sure that these like open source models are made available to help provide cost-effective AI usage and secure AI usage, as opposed to being the leading model creator.
And what about the privacy chatbots where they promise privacy and security similar to what we're offering?
Yeah, so and that's certainly one of those. It's, the best we can also do is kind of promise that right now, ultimately. um I do, my goal is to provide a general idea of how we've architected this so that you can kind of understand how your request routes through. So as opposed to just saying it's a private chatbot, you can actually see it's a private chatbot. We do also have the ultimate plan to roll out an option where you can bring your own cloud key, so we can kind of help provide a solution to, hey, you don't want to trust us outside of just providing the interface. You want it to run on like models that you host in AWS yourself. And we want to provide that ability long term.
Mm-hmm.
So then, we can even start and get into, especially for like businesses that are super privacy conscious, being able to provide a way that they can just host it all themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't even manage the database. The database is held in their infrastructure. The only reason we're there is to push an update when there's an update to the code.
Mm-hmm. So the way I look at it is there's an individual chatbot that you can go to, an LLM that offers privacy, versus Blaick, it offers a systems kind of solution. Would that be a good way to look at it?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Mm-hmm. Great.
The other kind of differentiator for us over a lot of the other general chatbots, the tokens that you get here, so when you sign up for a plan, so like the starter plan, I believe is 50,000 tokens. Once you get the token grant, you have 3 months to use those tokens. And we use a first in, first out model. So you have essentially 3 months to use those tokens before they actually fully expire and you can no longer use the system. So that means, if you have a month where you're traveling a lot and you're not using this because you're on vacation, you still have those tokens for when you come back and you don't. We moved away from a fully use it or lose it model like a lot of other chat systems are. Like you have the month to use it. If you don't use it, oh well. With us, you have 3 months,
Mm-hmm.
which I've always felt like just provides that ability for, you know, giving you the ability to kind of flex up and down as you need to over time without having to increase your plan and then you've got way too many tokens. So again, trying to help manage the cost and trying to help provide that overall value as a whole.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Okay, we have a question here from. I'm sorry if I.
So engineering tasks range from complex simulations to routine document drafting. How can an engineering company effectively use the auto router and the ability to switch between models like a big kidney model and a super cheap llama model, a big Kimmy model and a super cheap model to maximize cost savings across their entire workflow, such as for regulatory compliance checks versus high level technical analysis? Yeah. So this is one of those where ultimately our system tries to analyze the request. Now, what we will do, and I can kind of show this little pop-up of, so like this one specifically, I have the Kimmy model up. So if I just send a simple test, so the first thing that pops up is it shows, hey, you could save 95% on this request if you use the llama model as opposed to Kimmy. So then you're able to just use the llama model, and then it will go use the llama model instead, and you get charged at a 0.07x instead of a 1.4x. So it saves a lot of your tokens with these simple requests. So that's where we try to help guide you through those things when you're using the interface. As far as like using the auto router in general, my goal is to try and direct it to the most appropriate model. And that's something that ultimately our goal is to have some surveys to help pull information of like, how did this request go? And being able to take y'all's input and say, okay, we need to refine this, or we need to refine that, or this is going well, this is not going well. So I totally see your question because like ultimately I build out massive infrastructures, and frankly, the Olama model is never going to be able to build out some of the architecture that I work with. That's going to be a Kimmy or even really like an Opus model that I need to use. Whereas, a lot of times I end up with, a lot of times what I'm able to do, and ultimately the kind of workflow that we're targeting would be, you come in and you're like, hey, I need to build out this massive architecture. You start with like a bigger Kimmy model. Kimmy can kind of help be like, okay, here's this, here's that, break it up into individual tasks, and then start to hand that out to various Olama models or other open source GPT models as appropriate for the task. So even within like how it can kind of grow out, being able to provide that ability to choose a model for the task ultimately. Let me answer the other question, and I'll get your follow-up. So if the information inputted is not used to train AI, is it possible to train it to one's preferences? Ooh, that one's an interesting one, and that's a feature I hadn't thought of fully. So, but yeah, I think eventually it would be interesting to be able to like allow you to kind of build out your personal preferences. I know a lot of the models are allowing you to kind of start an input like I prefer responses like this, or I prefer responses like that. So absolutely, I think that's something we add to the roadmap for sure to see about doing, because I know I prefer it when my models provide me data how I like it. All right. So my follow-up question is that recognizing that network stability can sometimes be a challenge in Lagos, how does Blaick.ai's strategy of using smaller, focused open source models running on controlled servers translate into superior speed and reliability for local engineering teams compared to relying on massive remote AI systems for critical time sensitive queries? Yeah. So this one, I think this one's a little specific. So I'm going to try to answer it and tell you if I'm just totally off of what you're trying to ask. So ultimately, with what we have here, it is a cloud hosted model. I'm pretty sure I have it running in Virginia right now. So the point being, obviously kind of going just kind of across the Atlantic, even when I'm working on stuff in like a Europe data center, it can be spotty just by nature of life. So ultimately the goal is we start to, based on where users start to come, we start to host this closer to you so that you can have a closer connection. Because ultimately we can start to spin up servers in those areas that can host these models. So then it is running at least physically closer to you. But then ultimately, if there's a bigger concern of like internet connectivity and stuff, you know, we have a we have a way that we can ultimately cache all of these models locally so that like if you have a server in your office and you're like, we just want to run it off of this, great, we can deploy it to that. It can run everything locally. If there is no internet connection, you won't be able to get like model updates during that time, but you can go ahead and keep using it and work off of that model locally in your own data center, essentially, or own server. So it provides that ability of we're able to host this wherever and with a reasonable amount of we can move stuff around. But then ultimately, if it's just a concern of our internet connectivity or or even just because ultimately if you're hosting it yourself, we're not charging you for tokens. We'll charge you for the license to run the software, but ultimately you can throw as many requests at it as you want. We don't care about tokens at that point. So if you're just like, we just want to run it locally, great, run it locally and go for it. And then ultimately, internally you can kind of use tokens to help manage and make sure that individual employees aren't just like blowing through and like hogging all of the space if necessary. That one's a great question. I hope I answered what you were trying to get at there.
Wow, wonderful. Okay, so we have 10 minutes left. My question for you, Nicholas, then would be, how does this compare versus Microsoft Copilot?
Yeah, so Copilot is really just kind of a front end on a lot of Anthropic models right now and various OpenAI models. So it's kind of become the way that most businesses can kind of slip in AI, but then kind of keep stuff consistent with their Microsoft suite. So as far as that, it becomes a situation of I've always kind of had the opinion not only is OpenAI and Anthropic training off of your data, but Microsoft can also train off of your data. So not only is one company training off of, but two are potentially. So again, this is just kind of one of those where, ultimately you have access to a much more diverse array of models that you can potentially pull from and utilize versus Copilot having a very specific set amount of models that you may or may not trust.
Great. Okay. So what do you see happening over the next month? So what we're going to do is push these AMAs to once a month. And so the next time we'll meet is the May 17th or somewhere in that time frame on the last Friday in that week. What do you see happening over the next month for Blaick?
Yeah. So what we're working on right now is heavily bringing in even more model options. So ultimately, my goal is to offer as many models as possible that we can reasonably maintain. And that's just kind of making sure that we have the correct hardware to run the models and then bringing them in and getting it all set up. The other piece that we're tracking towards and working towards, we're constantly refining how we kind of route between things. That's just a constant, ever-going situation that we're managing. Just because we add new models, and suddenly this model is a better solution for that. So a constant work on that for sure.
Okay, great.
The other things that we're tracking towards, one of the big things that I've kept wanting is the ability to kind of point like Claude Code or Gwen Code or any of like those kind of like coding companions at your Blaick instance. So you're able to, so the ultimate goal being, rather than having to have a subscription over here, a subscription over here, a subscription over here, you can have the one central subscription, and then you're able to use those tokens across everything. Because the other interesting thing is, like, whereas with like Anthropic, if you want to use API, that's a separate charge that you get. These tokens work across your API keys. So, if you have an app that you're using AI in, you can just generate an API key and use your Blaick tokens with that. So it helps to provide a little bit more central management, as opposed to having to, having a heavy DevOps background and having to deal with so many different accounts. It's nice, in my opinion, to have one account that the credit card gets charged from, not 1,000. Because ultimately, you're always leaving money on the table somewhere, frankly. Like, there's somewhere where you're not fully utilizing a subscription. So my goal is, this helps to like fully utilize a subscription completely.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. So guys, we'll wrap it up here. Now, if you have more questions, you can reach out to me or Jude. Jude's kind of the front end developer, and he'll be able to connect with you guys and chat about this through the group. And let's keep the momentum going. If you don't have any other questions, we're going to close it off, and we'll meet in 1 month. So are there any more questions that you guys would like to ask? All right. Looks like that's it for today. So Nicholas, do you want to send us off with the last final thoughts or questions or ideas?
I appreciate y'all joining this first one, hopefully the first of many. I will say right now we are doing a Genesis plan. So the first 100 people to sign up, it's $99 for the first year, and then it'll drop to a starter plan. So a good opportunity to kind of get a good amount of tokens for a very low cost overall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we also have the family plan where you can pay $10 a month as well. So that's about a 65% discount on the actual pricing.
So
good stuff. All right, guys. Thanks a lot for joining us, and we'll see you in the group.